Hello, and welcome to Heilman Haver, the stage and screen podcast coming to you from Casa de Quinn Studios in beautiful Port Orchard, Washington. I'm Matt Haver.
And I'm Greg Heilman. We're two local actors looking to hone our craft by exploring the best in local theater and on the big screen. Each week we'll bring you an entertainment news and views, celebrate classic Hollywood, enjoy cocktails with a Tinseltown twist, and interview talented local actors and directors.
Today we welcome to the show our friend, actor, dancer, director, choreographer, and Western Washington Center for the Arts All-Star Rebecca Ewen.
Rebecca Ewen started her stage career at 2 months old, portraying baby Jesus in the church pageant. She received rave reviews when she was photographed pointing upward toward heaven. Growing up in a musical family, Rebecca performed in multiple community theater shows each year. She attended Central Washington University and received a bachelor's degree in theater, and since graduating, has choreographed and directed countless shows at WWCA, including summer children's workshops. She's appeared in too many shows to name here, but some of her favorites include The Snow Queen, Urinetown, Beauty and the Beast, and Little Shop of Horrors. Her favorite directing credits include Dog Sees God, Romeo and Juliet, Pippin, and The Rocky Horror Show.
Rebecca, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We're so glad you're here. So you grew up in a very artistic, theatrical family.
Yes, I did.
So was performing, acting specifically, a given growing up in the type of family you grew up in? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your family background.
Yeah, it was definitely a given because it was what my parents were doing on the weekends and stuff like that. So we'd be going with them anyways, and we all really enjoyed doing it, me and my siblings. And we would do almost every show that my parents were a part of. And we were never obligated to audition for anything, though. If we wanted to take time off and do a sport or something like that, my parents were always really supportive of that kind of thing. But I think they definitely liked that we enjoyed doing it. And I loved growing up and spending so much time with my family and my siblings. And I think it's a giant reason we're so close now as adults.
So having acted throughout your life and working with kids and adults of all ages, what advice do you have for young people who are considering maybe a career in theater or the performing arts?
Don't do it. Honestly. No, I think that a career is really difficult. And to be an actor, your whole day job is auditioning, plus your side work to be able to pay your rent. And it really takes a certain kind of person to try to do professional theater. That being said, I really encourage people to at least do it as a hobby, even if you don't pursue education in it or a career. And I loved going to theater school. I learned so much. And I think I learned a lot about people and psychology. And that was a really great experience. So if you really love it and you really want to do it and you really feel okay promoting yourself and putting yourself out there and really working hard at it, then absolutely go for it. But if you just want to do it as a hobby, I think that's also a really great thing. I think that doing community theater at any age, as a child, you learn public speaking skills, you gain friends, you come out of your shell and really can feel more comfortable. And a lot of people go on to be really successful adults just because they have that experience.
So when people are looking at shows, and this would be at any level, so if you're in a job interview or you want to get a job, they always say interview, practice, which gives you that practice. Is it the same thing with theater, that it's just even if you don't necessarily want have a role in mind, just audition?
Yes. Every opportunity. And nowadays, too, you have to do so much virtual promotion of yourself as well. So that adds a whole nother layer to it. And that's something, that you're technically doing in your free time. And it's a lot of work.
Now, you're known for many things locally, most of all your musicals down at WWCA. What do you think is the difference between producing and directing a musical versus a standard stage show?
A lot more time goes into a musical because you have to have music rehearsals and dance rehearsals. And usually you have a bigger cast than doing a non-musical. So yeah, a lot more time, a lot more effort. Dancing and singing can be more challenging for community members. They tend to be more confident in their acting skills for starting out. So people need to learn a lot more in musicals a lot of the time. Whereas I do love doing non-musicals like Romeo and Juliet and Dog Sees God. But my favorite thing about doing non-musicals is choosing the soundtrack to represent the characters and cover the scene changes. And that's something I feel like you get a little more freedom to express yourself. And yeah.
Now, I've been involved in a few musicals that you've directed, and Matt, you were about to.
I was about to. The last time we were together in the theater there was doing choreography for Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah, we got the whole thing choreographed.
Oh, man. She had me up there dancing in the aisles and into the audience. And, oh, man, it was a blast.
She can get anybody to dance.
I believe it.
But so there's so many components to that. There's costuming, there's choreography, there's music, there's acting with blocking and things like that. And I'm sure they all have their own challenges. Which of those do you, A, enjoy the most, and B, find the most challenging?
I love teaching people how to dance. Dancing was harder for me when I was younger. My sister was always a better dancer than me, so I just kind of struggled with it a little more. So when I'm teaching people how to dance, I like to think that I can be a lot more patient and really break it down with them, because I understand how hard it is and scary it is. And so I have an easier time with that. I do not like music rehearsals. So I have other people handle those. Harmonies come really easy to me, so it's frustrating. I don't know how to teach them to other people because they come so easy to me. So I'm like, I don't understand why you can't hear that. Why don't you have it after hearing it once? And so I'm not as patient. So I try to stay away from the music rehearsals.
Well, at WWCA, it's such a small stage compared to a number of the other theaters in the county. What do you do? I mean, do you do anything special, or you obviously have to keep that in mind when you're staging, especially at big productions? I'm thinking, Pippin, we had 30 some odd people on stage. Mary Poppins was a large cast, especially in the ensembles. What do you do, or how do you plan, or anything special to make sure that you can get the story across with the amount of people that you need to do that with in such a tiny space?
I try to give people lots of things to do. Cuts down on their boredom and stuff like that as well. But also, I don't need one person to do everything. Someone, can play a couple roles, and that saves me on my space on stage, because I also have to consider sets and stuff like that. We don't have a lot of room for transitioning our sets. So yeah, I like to give people more to do and cast fewer people.
We don't use the term small. We call it intimate. Or cozy.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of the teaching that you've done, you guys do summer camps for kids, and you and your mom are both involved in that, correct, Jan? How do you direct children of different ages and different acting abilities and skill levels and singing ability into one cohesive show?
Well, it starts with picking the right show. I'll see the kids that I have coming back each year, and I'll try to pick shows that offer bigger roles for them. And then I use my older kids to help teach the younger kids, instead of telling them like facts about why it's called upstage or something like that. I let the older kids answer, and they love that they know the answer, and the younger kids remember it better because the older kids know it. And trying to pair the kids, the ones that are more experienced with the ones that are new, and give them someone to teach and rely on, Do
you have any piece of advice for someone who's on the younger end, starting out with an audition process or trying to get into theater?
Don't be afraid to come in and sing Happy Birthday. If you don't know what you're supposed to prepare or what 16 bars is or anything like that, I think it's gotten easier now that people can just look up karaoke tracks and sing a wider variety of things rather than having to look for sheet music that they may not necessarily be able to read. Don't be afraid to come in and just sing Happy Birthday. Get your foot in there. All I need to do is hear if you have good pitch, and even sometimes if you don't have good pitch, I'm going to let you try it. I try to involve as many people and not say no as much as I can, because, it's a learning opportunity for people. And everyone should be able to do theater. If they want to try it, they deserve to try it. One more thing I want to add to that, actually, though, is if you don't get in the first show you audition for, don't be deterred from trying again. Because sometimes it's just too small of a cast and there's not enough space. That's specifically one of WWCA's problems. It's not necessarily that you didn't do a good job and that I wouldn't cast you in the future. It just didn't work out that time. So don't be afraid to try again.
And there are non-singing roles in musicals as well.
Absolutely.
So speaking of musicals, so now shifting gears, so Rebecca, as the consumer of media, what is your favorite musical to see?
I have two. Pippin and Cabaret.
And how about your least favorite?
The Secret Garden.
I think there's some inside joke here. Is that?
I really...
That's something that's anybody who spent any time with Rebecca at WWCA knows that.
So not a secret.
I hate The Secret Garden. Great music, beautiful music. I really, really love the music. But the story, the plot is so poorly written. And really, who wants to sit there for 3 hours listening to two bratty kids complain about living in a mansion? Right? Just... not a story that gets me.
That's the worst elevator pitch I've ever heard in my life.
I mean, I'm not wrong, right? Like that's.
No, you're not.
But
Don't
the music
walk, run.
is beautiful. Really, really beautiful music.
So, from a directing standpoint, what is your favorite musical to direct?
Well, Pippin is my favorite that I have directed. I'm a huge fan of Bob Fosse. And Cabaret is the one that I really want to direct. That's the next one. Yeah, they're my two favorite shows, and they both obviously were originally choreographed by Bob Fosse. But I just love the stories, and I feel like they're very important stories. Cabaret, especially in this time.
When you're looking at musicals to direct, because you've directed musicals from, as far as I can tell, almost every different era that they've had musicals, and when you choose a musical to do, because you can't obviously do every one, what do you use to consider that? What is kind of your criteria of the musical that you want to do that particular year, for instance?
A lot of it's based on whom I have currently in my audition pool and who I think I can get, because I want to make sure I'm doing shows I can cast. I also try to choose a variety. Like doing Junie B. Jones and Rocky Horror in the same time frame, so that adults have a musical and the kids have a musical and stuff like that.
Don't get that cast confused.
It was weird rehearsing both of them at the same time. I'd have back-to-back rehearsals, and going from the kids to the adults was a big shift in how you direct.
Billy, where's your fishnets?
Right. Exactly.
What are some of the challenges locally? Because we have a lot of people who are probably listening and thinking, man, sounds like fun. I've been listening, I've been learning. I'd like to get out there next time when things open back up. What are some of the casting challenges that you have? I know that we spoke with Jeffrey Bassett, and he said there's just no guys.
Yeah, guys is a huge issue, especially in musicals. Guys are okay with acting, but not a lot of them are as comfortable singing and dancing, and that's a hard thing to find.
Does that also go for the youngsters? Do you get a lot more girls involved than boys?
Absolutely, because girls love that stuff. And guys, the ones I do get are talented and they're great, and I love training them and watching them grow up. But it's way more difficult. I'll have, if we have 30 kids in our summer musical, I'd say maybe 5 are guys.
Wow.
If I'm lucky, I'll get 7 or something like that. So, but that's just more roles for the girls, because they get to play the boy roles.
So, as a director, when you look at a show from start to finish, what piece of that is usually the most rewarding for you, that you can step back and say, that really makes me either proud or happy, or I'm glad it turned out that way?
Overall, I'd say when they do a big number and their harmonies are strong and they just hit that end pose and you just see the joy in their faces. But more specifically, it's when I see a certain actor that I've been working with who overcomes something that was really difficult for them, and then they're really proud of themselves, and watching that growth in that person is by far the most rewarding.
And addicted to theater. At that point, they'll be coming back.
I remember the first time Quinn ran off stage after his first number, and the sheer joy. I had to try to keep him quiet. He was so excited. He was like, "That was the best moment of my life," and I was like, Awesome, but shh.
I can
Show's
honestly
still going.
say, having never done a musical since probably church, that's the most singing and dancing I've done on stage in decades. Probably the most dancing ever was with you, and I learned a ton just in the few, rehearsals we got to have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Pippin, I think, was the first time I really ever danced. And then when I was in Mary Poppins, not just singing, but learning to sing with other people. There's a little bit of that in Pippin in the ensemble, but as more of a lead in Mary Poppins and having never really sung in front of people by myself before was really challenging. But I mean, you with the process that you had in place made it really easy to pick that up and kind of just run with it.
So what has been the biggest challenge theatrically with the COVID shutdown, and what are you most looking forward to when things open up again?
For WWCA, of course, our biggest challenge is just paying our rent. Obviously, a lot of our income was from ticket sales. We're lucky that we were doing very, very well before COVID, the shutdown. Specifically after Seussical, that was a really successful show. Our last couple of years have been really successful, and we appreciate the support of our community on that one for sure. Everyone's really been coming out. That we've been doing okay, and our landlord has been having our rent.
Halving. Nice.
Yes, we've only
That's
been
wonderful.
paying half rent. We're really lucky for that. But yeah, it's just trying to keep on top of our normal bills and wait it out and hope that we can still have our space. The thing about WWCA though is that we're not the building, we're the community. And no matter what, if worse comes to worse and we lose our building, we're still going to come back once we can open up. We'll just be in a different space. Hopefully not. I love that building. It's so special.
Well, it's a landmark down there.
For sure.
When I used to walk through the walls, like I remember building this theater and everything that's gone into it over the years since I was in 7th grade. And, I'd be really sad, but it is just a building. I have to remind myself that.
So for our listeners who want to support WWCA, what's the easiest way to do that?
The easiest way is just go straight to our website and you can scroll down and there is a donate button that'll take you to donate via PayPal.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Rebecca. I think you're going to stick around for our next segment, our In the Mix segment, where we're going to mix up a drink related to something to know that's near and dear to you. And the drink is called the Time Warp. So guess what we're going to talk about when we come back on Heilman and Haver.
And welcome back to Heilman and Haver. Now is the time for a segment we like to call In the Mix, where our resident mixologist, Mr. Heilman, will be preparing a special cocktail, has prepared a special cocktail. They're sitting in front of us. They're gorgeous. And today it's in honor of the cult classic that graced the stage at WWCA in 2016 and 18, a Halloween favorite, a perennial favorite, a cult classic, the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And this drink is called what, Mr. Heilman?
The Time Warp.
The Time Warp. And maybe our guest, Rebecca Ewen, would like to fill us in on the significance of the title, The Time Warp, once we've tasted it. Let's taste it.
Ooh, wow.
It is good.
I second that.
For those scoring at home, melon liqueur, Midori melon liqueur, Malibu rum, pineapple juice, blue curacao, and raspberry cordial.
And these are in
We'll put
martini glasses tonight.
These are in martini glasses. Yeah,
We'll
so
have a photo and a recipe up on the website.
You can put them in whatever glass you have. Doesn't matter, as long as you enjoy it.
Tastes the same.
Yep. So we'll post the recipe online with show notes.
So, Rebecca, tell us about the Time Warp. What is the significance of that name for this drink?
I mean,
speaking of the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
The Time Warp is the most popular song in Rocky Horror Show and the easiest to dance to.
And I mean, Rocky Horror, for those living under a rock who are unfamiliar with this show, has set a lot of records.
Yes.
Arguably one of the most famous musicals of all time, the longest running movie in syndication of all time. I'm reading all this stuff in prep for the show tonight, and it really has become a cultural phenomenon in its own right.
It's one of those things. You'll go to a theater, movie theater. They'll show the movie version of it. People will dress, bring all kinds of things. Just like when we the stage show, which I had never seen any version of Rocky Horror before the 2018 show at WWCA. So I was under a rock.
Most people are probably familiar with Rocky Horror Picture Show, the film version with, of course, Tim Curry, immortalized Tim Curry. We were arguing about what the best role he has done. That's impossible to come to a conclusion on that one. I'm a big fan of Clue. Greg's a big fan of Muppet Treasure Island. Yeah, Long John Silver. Is this your favorite Tim Curry role?
Yeah. Yeah, he did do a really amazing episode of Criminal Minds, though.
Oh.
Now, was this a personal thing that to bring this to WWCA? Is this something that you've just enjoyed forever and wanted to bring it, or did something else initiate the decision to bring Rocky Horror?
It was actually because I got so many requests for it. Over the years, people kept saying they wanted to do it. And obviously, it doesn't really fit into our normal season for our normal season ticket holders. And I love Halloween. It's my favorite. Obviously, my birthday was a couple days ago. Halloween is the best time of year.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. 32. Ugh. Anyways, yeah, lots of people wanted to do it. And so I wanted to do something special for Halloween back in 2016. And so we threw it in there and it was successful.
Well, I think it has to be a special show like that because it is off schedule. And it's only, I think it was only 2 weekends.
The first time we did it, it was 4 shows. So we did like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The second time we did it for 2 weekends.
So either way, a limited run compared to the other shows at the theater.
It's a hard show to run for 5 weekends.
Yeah, I'm sure. But I think just it's still a lot of work to prepare. Mm-hmm. And I think it shows how loved the show is that you're willing to put that same amount of work in for a shorter run.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And now, did you do the version where you have the movie playing behind?
No.
Okay, so this is strictly the stage version.
This is us acting it out, actually saying the lines, playing the characters, rather than just impersonating them in front of the movie.
And what was the response from the community? I mean, this is there's got to be challenges to casting and promoting a stage show that some people still see as very controversial, even in 2020.
You know, I was actually pleasantly surprised for the demographic of our turnout. I expected a lot of youth, and it ended up being more adults who grew up going to the movie when it originally came out. You know, those fans were the people who came and really enjoyed seeing it live in that way.
Is there a challenge with licensing with a show like this that does come out every year in some way, shape, or form at theaters?
Actually, that's the reason we didn't do it 2 years in a row. The original reason we waited 2 years in between was because it was touring the second year around. So we had originally planned to do it 2 years in a row, and then we had to wait a year to do it.
So overall, what do you think is the cult appeal and fascination with Rocky Horror? People who haven't even seen the movie or seen the stage show probably have heard of it. What do you think what's spawned from that? Is it just the controversy? The music is just that amazing?
Definitely was because of how risque it was, I think, at the time. And it gave people an outlet and a community that they felt they could be themselves and be more accepted in, and it opened up a lot of opportunities for people to express who they were through it. And it's fun, and to get that community of people. There's a lot of people who continuously go see it, and it's like a tradition for them, and they have groups of friends that they go with and stuff like that. So I think that community of it and the familiarity of being a part of that cult group who likes the show, yeah, I think that's...
It is definitely a team sport. When you go to see Rocky Horror.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not just a viewer. You've got to be a participant. Whether you like it or not.
And it's a weird thing, too, to be on the stage doing it. You know how you have to hold for laughs in a normal show, right? And that changes based on your audience and how receptive they are. But for Rocky Horror, it's totally different because you don't know if they're going to yell every single thing at you or if they're going to yell nothing at you. So you really have to adapt to your audience and be ready to be heckled. You know,
everybody now.
You're up there wearing very little clothing and they're saying very, sexual things towards you, and you just got to be okay with it.
Be a professional.
And it's fun.
Well, how many times have you directed yourself? You said you stepped in. Second one.
I've never cast myself originally in a show, but I have had to step in a lot. Sometimes just for one show, and that's really nice. Sometimes for one act to cover a dancing role. But there have been other times where I've stepped in and had to do the full run. I feel like only twice I've had to step in and do the entire run of a show.
Do you find that challenging?
I hate it so much because it's hard to watch everybody else and be directing them while you're trying to focus on what you're doing, and then you feel like you haven't done enough preparation and you're behind. I remember being on stage during Hapatuti, and it was like our preview night or something, and I realized when we started doing the song that I'd never practiced doing it as Janet. I'd only been standing in front of everyone doing it, doing the dance, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think about what I'm supposed to do in the scene. It was it puts a lot more on your plate, and memorizing lines and all that stuff, a whole new responsibility, and I prefer to watch everybody else succeed.
Well, when you have a show like that that's so well known by so many people, when you cast it and you bring the folks in to play these parts, do you find that they mirror what they've seen before? Do they tend to change the characters? 'Cause most times in shows, you're cast as a character, but you kind of make that your own, create your own backstory, things like that. But these things, especially with a show like this, have so much history and time behind them. Do you find the same thing, that or that people just pretty much stay with, hey, this character is like this in the movie, so I'm going to be like this?
Sometimes people want to see the specific bit that's from the movie, the way that they reacted in the movie. But I do think I had a few actors who really put their own spin on their characters, and I enjoyed that. It's fun to be able to see different people portraying different parts and taking it their own ways and really experimenting with it.
So are these the craziest costumes? We were talking a little bit about costumes during the break. Are these the craziest costumes in any show that you've done?
Yes. You just have so much more freedom. And I'd say Pippin costumes were really fun to do, and those were crazy as well because you have a lot of freedom in that show. But Rocky Horror is definitely the most scantily clad one, for sure. A lot of my cast took a lot of freedoms in their costumes, and they just turned out so cool. So I liked doing costumes for that. I feel like people had so much room to be creative and do whatever they wanted. And I didn't say no to a lot either. It was like, cool, you want to work? Sure.
So this is a show for the adventurous.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the spirit of it,
Well, for all the Rocky Horror Picture Show fans out there and Tim Curry fans, it's interesting, the timing, because this is our Halloween show. It's launching on Friday the 30th, so tomorrow is Halloween. And Tim Curry, who, again, has been disabled by a stroke a few years back, is actually going to be making a public appearance, one of his first in a really long time, a part of a live stream to benefit Wisconsin Democrats with a whole bunch of other celebrities. It says, according to the Hollywood Reporter, I'm reading from Vulture right now here at vulture.com, he's going to be joined by co-stars from the 75 film Barry Bostwick and Nell Campbell, who played Brad Majors and Columbia respectively, for a live stream of Rocky Horror. They're going to be joined by Wilmer Valderrama, Lance Bass, Rosario Dawson, Jason George, Seth Green, Jason Alexander, Taylor Schilling, and David Arquette, among others. And it sounds like a fun event. Yeah. That's actually happening the evening of Halloween, so 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. We'll post the link if you wanna jump in. You can donate any amount and get in on this live event. So it sounds like it's going to be a good time.
Yeah, and that's right on the heels of we were talking before. Jack Black and Tenacious D did a kind of an all-star time warp for the Get Out the Vote campaign. So
that was so good.
I think we'll have to post that link as well.
And we will.
Yeah. We're just going to be all Rocky Horror all the time.
If you haven't seen it yet, it's so amazing.
That'll be in the show notes, so everybody check that out. I think we need to make another one of these and possibly listen to Jack Black's version. In our next segment, it's going to be our In the News segment, and we're actually going to return to a subject from our episode 2 of Heilman and Haver in the News. And we're going to play a segment from Greg's interview with Michael Goodnow. He's the COO of Faraway Entertainment and the parent company of the historic Roxy Theater in Bremerton. We're going to talk about COVID, and we're also going to talk about the impact of US v. Paramount on local theaters. So join us. Come right back for more on Heilman and Haver.
Welcome back to Heilman and Haver. As Matt teased in the previous segment, we're going to revisit a topic that we talked about in episode 2, the US versus Paramount decision, which, for a little refresher, broke up the studio system in Hollywood, forced studios to divest their interest in theaters and the distribution chain. We talked about the history of that and the recent overturning of it in light of a number of direct-to-streaming movies and things like that. We had the opportunity to get the perspective of a local theater by interviewing Michael Goodnow, COO of Faraway Entertainment, the parent company of the historic Roxy Theater, among others in Kitsap County and throughout Washington. And he was able to talk to us about that a little bit, U.S. versus Paramount, the implications of COVID and how that impacted their theater, and a little bit of background and context on how theaters and studios interact and things like that. So it was a good discussion. I'm going to play a small part of it here. If you want to hear the entire interview, we'll have that posted up on our YouTube channel. Welcome to Heilman Haver on the Road. Tonight we're coming to you from the beautiful Roxy Theater in downtown Bremerton, Washington. And with us is Michael Goodnow, operating officer of Faraway Entertainment. With the COVID pandemic impacting theater chains and local theaters alike, we're looking forward to hearing from Michael to get his perspective on what it's been like during the shutdown, what the challenges have been in the current environment, and as things get opened up, what does it look like now, and what does the future look like beyond the current pandemic situation? And additionally, on episode 2 of the Heilman and Haver podcast, we discussed the U.S. versus Paramount decision and the breaking up of the studio system and the divesting of the theater and distribution chains from the studios. And we're going to talk to Michael about some thoughts on that and potentially how that might affect the local theater landscape. So welcome, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
So we're looking forward to getting your perspective on these things, but if you wouldn't mind, just for the listeners, a quick little introduction and bio, and maybe some info on the Roxy Theater.
Sure, absolutely. One of my favorite subjects. Like you mentioned, my name is Michael Goodnow, and I'm an operating officer for Faraway Entertainment. We operate 8 theaters in the Puget Sound, and one of them is the Roxy. Roxy's a little unique in that it also has a nonprofit partner. So there's a nonprofit that's actively working to purchase the building to be able to sustain the theater into the future. Theater opened in 1941 in the spring Memorial Day weekend, and it had it had a great run, and then in the 80s started to, I think it was the 80s, ended up shutting down permanently as a theater, operated as a church for a little while. Probably 3 to 4 years ago, local developers purchased the building, purchased other buildings on the street here, and to help revitalize the area, they saw the Roxy as an important sort of gem in that redevelopment. So the future of it will also be the street becoming Quincy Square, named after Quincy Jones, who discovered music here in Bremerton. But the theater has a great history. Frank Sinatra's been here, Bing Crosby's been here, and of course, lots of movies throughout the year. We've got a state-of-the-art projection. We have the only laser projector, I think, in Kitsap County. We have a fantastic Dolby 7.1 surround system. We just put in all new seats on the main floor, and we're hoping to eventually fund replacing the seats in the balcony. And one of the reasons it's a little chilly in here right now is we're in the middle of upgrading our HVAC system. The building's never had air conditioning, had a giant swamp cooler in the attic. But we've got some of the heating sides down. We're also making improvements with filters and fresh air exchange and things like that to kind of be part of our sort of protocols for opening in this time during the pandemic.
That's nice. As we walked around here and we're looking for places to set up, it really does give you the feel of kind of that old-timey theater. We got some of the old seats sitting here, and a lot of what looks to me like original pieces. And then, mixing that with modern technology, bringing it up to kind of a, modern day comfort level and the projection system is really nice.
It's a fantastic place to see a movie. We've got 500 seats in there. So right now there's plenty of social distancing available. And again, it's the big screen, the big auditorium. It's built with all this great Northwest timber. It's just solid. It's not drop ceiling tiles and drywall walls. it's a solid building, and you'll have to stay after and take in the next movie and be able to really see what the sound does in this building. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think we're definitely planning on doing that. You're showing Tenet right now.
Yeah, it'll be our last showing of Tenet. So.
Okay, so yeah, we're gonna stick around there, and if we're lucky, maybe we'll get our first Heilman and Haver movie review.
There you go.
After that.
Yeah.
Well, so in the second episode of the Heilman and Haver podcast, we discussed the ruling from the 1940s, U.S. versus Paramount, that ostensibly broke up the studio system, where the studios owned the theaters, owned the distribution chain, exerted all amounts of control, deciding what to show and putting pressure on smaller theaters. Given that was overturned in August, so that there's really no legal limits to what studios can do, and then also given the increased amount of direct to streaming service or direct to video releases. Now, obviously with the pandemic and COVID, it's been a different landscape. But coming out of that, obviously, I think things could potentially change. Do you believe that, from what you're seeing, this trend of direct to streaming and studios controlling more of where they distribute their films is going to change that landscape as we come out of this?
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I think my quick answer would be I hope not. I do think this is a pandemic-related business decision for them, and although we'd like them to have held out and just had the most incredible film selection afterwards, you look at a Disney and they launched Disney Plus and they need content, and so content wasn't rolling off of theaters to the video on demand platform and things like that. And I feel like we had been seeing studios like Amazon and Netflix, either doing limited releases or they obviously produce a lot of content that never stops in theaters. One thing about that is, if you've got a film that you're interested in for awards, Oscars, or you have to get the in theater play. I don't know. I think that we may see shorter windows. We're kind of seeing that right now, where a film might be in theaters and then go to video on demand faster. In fact, there's a film that we almost opened with tomorrow, that was being released to theaters at the same time as going live on, I think, Apple Plus, and that's just a tough business call for us right now, because we do need people who are want to come out and experience a movie here.
Yeah.
So if they can get it there, maybe that's where they should, and we'll adjust. So
yeah, I think it's from my perspective, it's going to be interesting. Now, when Disney released Mulan, they put the $30 price tag, and we talked about that, which seems at this point still to just be kind of a one-off, maybe test to see how that played out. But when you have a movie like Soul now from Pixar, it's going to be released directly to streaming. A, that's going to change the award landscape, to your point, and B, the financial landscape. Yes, they don't have, the studios don't have to share revenues with theaters, but on the other hand, it's a different financial model, and we don't know how that's going to play when you talk about Avengers, Infinity War,
right.
Endgame, making billions of dollars, versus how do you match that to something that's released to streaming. So it's going to be interesting to see if that financial model works and how that impacts whether this change coming out of this.
Yeah, I think that I think it's going to be in everyone's best interest to get back to as close to business as before as possible. It's interesting that I don't know if you know that this was a United Artists Theater.
Oh, really?
And I don't know if Bremerton had 7 big movie houses back in the day. There was obviously people right now know the Admiral and of course the Roxy, and then Bay Bowl over in Manette was a big theater. The Charleston down on Callow was a the Grand, there was a Rex, there was a Rialto. So there were like 7 big movie houses, and it's because of that the studio, who had their own cast of characters, and directors and everything. They made the movies, they sent them to their theaters, and to get their movies shown, they had to build a theater in the town. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a different perspective.
So, and I don't know if you kind of hit on this yet, but so that's why one of the reasons I don't see the removing the universal decision as that it's certainly not going to go back to the way it was. Now, I could see an Amazon wanting to have, just by nature of their leadership, wanting to have a big grand movie theater maybe in LA to do their own stuff, or maybe one here in Seattle,
like Disney has with El Capitan.
Yeah, like I guess the difference is like Amazon could buy the Cinerama, and it could be a showcase for their films and other, so with it, which that wouldn't have kind of been allowed. So there's some things, but there's also a lot of anti-trade things have happened. There's other things that have been put in place that I think will, I don't think we're seeing this as too big of a threat, at least at this point.
Yeah, and the business landscape has definitely changed. I mean, in the 1940s and the early part of the century, it was almost the norm where you had newspaper barons, and you had people that were exerting all sorts of influence. And things these days, there's so much scrutiny over every business decision that's made. I would think that if one of the studios tried to exert some sort of excess influence, they'd be called out on it pretty quickly.
Yeah. Although, it's interesting. There's some areas of business that are not being allowed that, and there's other areas that are just taking off with that. So.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think before we wrap up, you mentioned the not-for-profit. Do you have any more, information on that? How people can help out?
Sure. We have a membership program that we're launching, where you get some member perks and benefits, and it supports the theater. You can get your on these new seats we just put in. You can get a nameplate on them that to commemorate or memorialize something, or just tell somebody to move. It's your seat. I don't know if I can enforce that, but I'll let you put anything you want on your plaque. And we're getting ready to launch a capital campaign. The developer refurbished the building, and they're actually selling us the building for just the cost of the refurbishment, so all the new electrical and upgrades and things like that happened. And we're probably going to try to launch a campaign to raise about $100,000, and that'll get us pretty close to the finish line. We've got some commitments from state arts funding, local community foundations, and so we're pretty confident. And so.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Michael. We definitely appreciate the time and your perspective. I think Mr. Haver and I are going to go wrap this up and go take a look at Tenet before it ends its run here.
All right. Well, thanks for having us. Thanks for coming to the Roxy.
Anytime. Thanks so much. That was a portion of the interview I had last week with Michael Goodnow, COO of Faraway Entertainment. If you'd like to see the whole video, please visit our YouTube page and take a look at it. It was a fascinating discussion about a number of topics.
Thanks for your work on that interview, Greg. It was very informative, and thanks to our guest, Michael Goodnow, COO of Faraway Entertainment and the historic Roxy Theater, another great local theater that you should all go out and support. Coming up next is our curtain call segment, the final segment of Heilman and Haver. We're excited to throw some fun questions at our guest, Rebecca Ewen. Thank you again for joining us, Rebecca. We'll be right back with Curtain Call right here on Heilman and Haver. And welcome back to Heilman and Haver, the Stage and Screen podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and if you have, please tell a friend and join us on Facebook, and you can find us anywhere fine podcasts are found: Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and you can also find us right at our website, which is heilmanandhaver.podbean.com. So thanks to our guest today, Rebecca Ewen. We've had a lot of fun, and we've got a few more questions for you before you wrap things up here. So, Greg?
Sure thing. So, Rebecca, what's the last thing you do before you step on stage or before the curtain goes up?
I do a couple Tao breaths. It's kind of hard to explain over a podcast, but you raise your arms And you inhale, you go down and you exhale 4 times before coming back up again. It's a great way to catch your breath and slow down your heart rate and calm down a little bit before. It's actually a really good trick if you do a really serious scene and you come off stage and you're having a hard time letting go of those emotions, that you just do a couple down breaths and yeah.
If you could work with one person, alive or deceased, who would you most like to work with?
I think Neil Patrick Harris. He is my favorite.
Good old NPH.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite roles he's had?
Well, I mean, I love How I Met Your Mother, of course. And, Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I love all of his hosting stuff that he does for the Tonys and stuff like that. The song Bigger and all that. I find him very impressive.
A lot of hosting, a lot of commercial work, too.
Yeah.
And always very, very fun.
Yeah, and I read his autobiography, and he's just a really, really genuine person, so...
If someone was going to make your life into a film, who would you like to play you?
I love Kate Hudson.
Ah, yes.
We're not very similar, but she's my favorite, so...
Now here's the kicker question.
And before I ask that, I want to revisit the Neil Patrick Harris thing.
Okay.
And if you have not seen him play Count Olaf in Lemony Snicket's Series of Unfortunate Events, you have to see that.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It is fantastic. So, back on topic. Matt asked, who would you like to play you? Who do you think would be cast?
I feel like someone like Drew Barrymore, maybe.
I can see that.
Yeah.
No slouch in her own right.
Yeah.
I like it. Well, thank you so much for joining us. You've had a great time. And again, if people would like to donate or support WWCA, can you go ahead and throw that info back out for folks?
You can donate on our website at wwca.us. Scroll down and there's a donate button, and any little bit helps.
Excellent. And we'll also post a link to the support page for WWCA in the show notes. So thank you again, Rebecca Ewen, and thank you to our associate producer, Quinn Heilman. Coming up on our next episode on November 13th, we're going to talk to local artist and Bainbridge Performing Arts Center instructor Scott Breitbarth about his upcoming film project at BPA, the holiday classic, The Nutcracker. Until then, please join the conversation on Facebook, and you can email us with thoughts and comments and suggestions at heilmanandhaver@gmail.com.
You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you enjoy the show, make sure to follow us and share the podcast with a friend. Don't forget to join us November 13th, and until the footlights come up again, thank you for supporting local theater and for joining us on Heilman and Haver.